In 1999, the state of Texas decided that I was a security threat to the institution, the staff, and that's when they placed me in solitary confinement.
Wow.
And that's where I spent the next 13 years of my life in a 5x8 cell.
5x8 cell, 6'5".
Yeah.
300-pound man in a 5x8 cell for 13 years.
13 years.
As men age, so often they struggle with a sense of purpose. They struggle with a vision for their life. They find themselves in a place of diminishing influence. It's so common for men to react in such a way that they actually pull back. When you pull back, you find yourself in a place of isolation. And isolation is never a good place for a man. I've heard it said that a life worth living is an examined life. What my hope is to challenge you to examine your life, to be honest with yourself. And then when you find yourself and you see yourself through the lens of honest appraisal, make a decision to live with intentionality. You can make the next third of your life the very best third of your life, but it takes courage. It takes courage to make that decision that I'm not going to settle any longer. You've spent your entire life building family, building career, building influence, only to reach a place in your life where you start to draw back. That's such a lie. That's such a deception. Your best third lies ahead of you. No matter what you've faced in your life, no matter what you've gone through, the regrets you may have for missed opportunities, those don't disqualify you. Rather, they uniquely qualify you. They uniquely qualify you because you can impart wisdom. You can impart lessons learned. You can speak into the lives of those following behind. We need you. The world needs you to step up and have vision again. Use your imagination. What can my life look like? Welcome to Next Third, Best Third. Well, hey guys, welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick. I'm the founder and the host, and today I have the great pleasure of bringing in one of my dearest friends, one of my favorite people in the world, Ron Adkins. Ron has, besides being just a fantastic guy, he's got one of the most incredible stories you're ever going to hear. So just buckle up. This is going to be an amazing time. And Ron, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. It's an honor.
I know. I love you.
I love you too.
I want you to get in and share your story, but something I was thinking about, because I've heard your story so many times, and I never get tired of it. I always learn new things, always encourages me in different ways. But let's start more with your childhood. You know, where you were born. Tell a little bit about your childhood, because so much of how we react to things comes from, right? What our childhood was like. Right. You know, and every guy here, every man who's listening, man and woman, could identify with that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was born in 1972 in Irving, Texas, which is Dallas area. Mm-hmm. And I was really a miracle baby. My parents didn't think they could have children. They were told they would never have children. They even tried to adopt a girl, and it didn't work out. But they were married for 12 years before I showed up. Well, and so I was the answer to my mom's prayers. And so I really feel like God, you know, he brought me into this world for a purpose. There was a purpose on my life, but of course the enemy I believe the enemy can see that purpose on your life. And he comes to try to create counterfeits from the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah.
And a good friend of ours, Dr. Kathy, calls them birth assignments. That's the enemy's counterfeit for your purpose. And so my dad was he was a Korean War vet, and I think, you know, he had some mental issues, and he was just a rageaholic. I never saw him touch my mom in any kind of physical way, but he would just yell and scream, and of course he would be physically abusive to me and my little brother both. And so that's the way I grew up, just a house full of anger. Any little thing could set him off, you know. Mm-hmm. And I remember many times saying, you know, when I grew up, I wouldn't be like him, you know, and just hating him. just wanted to take the first opportunity to get away. And so when I got to be a teenager, I got my first job when I was about 13 and started just working on trying to get the heck out of there, And my mom, she was a real quiet, just sweet, passive person, So she never had, never stood up to my dad, always made excuses for him. And
yeah.
of course, she did the same thing for us. She was an enabler. But when I first left home when I was 14, I ended up getting my first felony when I was 14 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I broke into a school. The principal had taken, I think, a knife or something from me, and I was going to go in there and get it back. But me and some other friends of mine went in there together, and we just tore the place up and stole a bunch of stuff. And so I ended up getting in trouble for it. Yeah, and then got put on probation. And I was thinking the other day, I've been on probation from the time I was 14 years old. I'm 51 now. I've been on paper my whole life.
So here you were, you didn't want to be like your dad. You wanted to go totally different, and yet somehow you kick-started you on some sort of a life of crime.
Yeah, well, also addiction,
Yeah.
I got into drugs and alcohol, and just as a way to party, really.
Sure.
But it turned into something more as it went along. And the more deeper in addiction I got, the deeper into criminal activity I got,
Yeah.
And I got involved with a kind of a gang, like skinhead guys, and we was kicking in drug house doors and robbing them. And
where was this?
This is all over the place, but mostly Dallas and Northeast Texas.
Okay.
Going out towards Texarkana, Sulphur Springs area. Just wherever. And so that's where I ended up getting arrested, out in East Texas, Northeast Texas. And looking back on it, I think I was kind of an aimless, just go with the flow, no purpose, no direction, no drive,
Right.
no I want to be this or I want to be that. I didn't have that.
You just knew what you didn't want to be.
Yeah, and that was it.
Yeah.
But I never had any like, oh, I'm going to be a fireman or I'm going to be an astronaut or I'm going to be something that I was striving for.
Right.
That and I think my dad really, like, even like he was real down on the military or college or anything like that. He was always putting it down when I was growing up. So I never had that ambition, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But or even the trade. Like I grew up learning how to weld from him, and I think even that was like, because it was part of what he did. Even though I knew how to do it, I didn't want to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but so I think that's really the main thing that led me into prison, was just that purposelessness.
Yeah.
Meaningless.
Just to jump in real quick, one of the things I was thinking of, and it triggered it here while you're telling me your story, is how important it is for a dad, as a man, to encourage his son and daughter to dream. Right?
Sure.
To partner with their dreams, to inspire them to, just kind of go and what inspires you? What do you want to do? And so many times, I mean, my dad was a World War II vet and everything, and the guys in that age, they didn't know how to do that well,
Or I don't even think they knew that they were supposed to, maybe.
Right. It wasn't modeled, I'm sure.
Right, yeah, for them either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that's powerful in the way the church has grown recently over the last few decades, where the message is coming out about dreaming with God and actually what is it and what desires has He put in my heart.
Right.
It's something that I'm working on now. from 26 years of being in prison.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I never thinking I was getting out, you know.
Right.
I never had dreams then either.
No. Big part of Next Third, Best Third is to encourage men, inspire men to make the next third of life the best third. But to do that, guys of all ages, you know, you're how old?
51.
You know, getting guys at age 51 and older, you know, and guys in their 40s to you know, keep dreaming, you know.
Yeah.
Because you have to have some vision for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It can't be just, hey, I'm going to go to the end, right?
Well, the Bible says my people perish for lack of vision.
Right.
Yeah, there has to be some vision for what you want to do to bring meaning and purpose and
Sure.
and accountability and responsibility,
Yeah.
and all those things work together for sure.
Okay, so here you are. You got arrested. How old were you then?
17.
Okay.
And started going through the court system, and eventually I went before a judge and was sentenced to 5 99-year sentences.
5 separate 99-year
Mhm.
sentences.
Yeah, for burglary of habitation, home invasion. Yeah.
495 years.
Yeah, they were trying to make an example out of me.
And what kind of parole? I mean, when were you eligible for parole?
Well, once I got down there, I found out I wasn't going to get out till 2096.
2096, okay.
Which I wasn't
72
gonna make
years
that.
from now.
Yeah, I wasn't going to make that.
No.
But, and this was back in the 90s, so
Sure.
it was even longer than that.
Wow.
But-
Okay, so they put you in where?
Yeah, I went to Texas prison and eventually ended up on the Cofield unit, which is down near Palestine, Texas.
Okay.
Tennessee Colony, Texas. And it was like what they call a gladiator farm, right? It was a lot of gangs and just matter of fact, it was on lockdown because of a gang war the day I stepped on the property.
Wow.
And so it was just a crazy place to be. And I went in there with this mentality, you know, I was a big man and knew how to fight, and I decided I was going to make a reputation for myself.
Yeah.
You know, if I was going to have to spend the rest of my life in prison, then I was going to do it my way.
Yeah, and for those of you who can't tell, I'm 6 foot tall, 184 pounds, and he just makes me look little. How tall are you?
6'5".
6'5".
Yeah, 300.
Man, okay, so here you are, a young guy going to do it his way in prison.
Mm-hmm. And so I went about just doing anything and everything I could, violent behavior. Ended up getting recruited by the gangs after they saw that I could fight, you know, because they want to try to take advantage of you. And ended up getting in a white supremacist gang called Aryan Circle. At the time, it was one of the most violent prison gangs in the state.
Wow.
And from there, violence just increased because in prison, might makes right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The more violent you are, the more respect you get. And really I didn't know it at the time, but now I do, looking back. It was all driven by fear.
Sure, yeah.
It was me on the inside saying, you know, I've got to do this to protect myself. I've got to do this to show everybody that I'm the tough guy. But it was that fear on the inside of me of my vulnerability.
Sure.
That was driving it all, you know. Also my self-hatred and my self-destruction that I was, you know, fostering.
Well, we talk a lot about men that just all over the place, all over the world, you know, men that you and I interact with all the time. Vulnerability is a tough thing. I can only imagine what it's like to be vulnerable in a prison.
There's not any.
There isn't, yeah.
Yes, there's not any. not in the just general population environment.
Sure.
You know, I mean, there's programs and stuff where men can actually talk to each other, but it's still very hard to get men to open up.
Yeah.
You know, and be vulnerable in that situation because it is seen as weakness, and it will be taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's just the way it is in there. So as this is building my mentality, going further and further, I really believe that I was, demonically possessed or oppressed or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because the violence just became worse and worse, and especially with like the officers, that would try to exert their authority over me, I would always rebel against it, and I racked up many staff assaults and many disciplinary infractions. So to the point of where in 1999, the state of Texas decided that I was a security threat to the institution and staff, and that's when they placed me in solitary confinement.
Wow.
And that's where I spent the next 13 years of my life in a 5x8 cell.
5x8 cell, 6'5".
Yeah.
300-pound man in a 5x8 cell for 13 years.
13 years. But the violence didn't stop there, because what they did was when they isolated me, when you get isolated like that, the Proverbs 18 says that when a man isolates himself, he rages against his own soul. Right?
Okay.
And so that's what I was doing in that place, because my self-hatred and self-destructive behaviors increased.
Yeah.
In that isolation. Yeah. Because there were no more distractions from it.
Right. So you were facing it all the time, or at least dealing. It was coming up all the time.
It had a result to really radical things to make a distraction.
Right. And you didn't have the ability because you weren't interacting with anybody to speak of.
Except for the officers.
Right.
So that's where I took it out on.
Yeah.
And so I ended up, there's 3 levels of what they call administrative segregation, or ADSEG, in Texas prison, solitary confinement. Level 1, 2, and 3. And level 3 is the lowest you can go anywhere in the prison. It's the lowest of the low. And so because I was so assaultive and I would fight with them so much, that's where I stayed for about the first 6 years.
Wow.
And that's level 3 is basically where they put all the criminally insane that they can't deal with,
Right.
And so that's where I lived.
You said that, I remember you telling me where they took a group of them to get you into the showers and everything.
Oh, yeah. They would come and chain me up, hand and foot, and escort me to the shower and stuff like that. That was later on. After I used to just get handcuffed behind your back, and I would come out and I'd break out of the handcuffs. And they would bring whole teams of guys in riot gear with tear gas. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And you told me too that you were famous. You were like a movie star almost. You were in some of their training films. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a guy that's a jail administrator in Sulphur Springs that we work with a lot in this jail. We go in to minister, and he was actually a warden on Hughes Unit years ago. And he always tells the story about watching them videos of them trying to subdue me, because anytime they do a major use of force, they would have to bring a camera to show what's going on, and they would have them Region 2, which is where that unit was at, wardens meetings, and they would show those videos as training videos to show how bad it can be, I guess. I don't know.
It's wild.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, he likes telling that story.
Yeah.
Kenneth. But yeah, so years go by. In 2005, my dad passed away by lung cancer. And I had some contact with him, him and my mom would come visit and stuff, and our relationship had gotten better. He had started to know the Lord a lot better, and God was really, changing him and helping him with his anger and stuff like that, it really affected me more than I guess I ever considered it would.
His passing?
Yeah. And that's when I started trying to figure out what's going on with me. What's my issue? How am I going to overcome this stuff? But it wasn't about God, because by that time I was into paganism. I was in runic magic and crazy meditation stuff.
Yeah.
And, man, I've been reading books on philosophy and psychology and just, history, you name it, I've studied it. And but I really started getting motivated to change my behavior and try to figure out, how can I live a better existence in this?
Sure. Yeah.
And because I was doing nothing but self-destructing constantly. And that process went on for a few years.
I find it interesting, though, at that point, here you were doomed, right? You're going to die in prison.
Yeah.
And yet something inside of you was starting to say, hey, I've got to have a better existence, even in here. There was a little bit of hope or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hope was beginning to be birthed in my heart, I think, during that time. And even though I didn't believe there was a God, I mean, even to the point of like persecuting people that were Christians, making fun of them, and because but I had been exposed to church when I was a kid.
Sure.
But I always thought it was just a bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah.
I never knew who God was.
Right. Well, I know we run into, when we talk about our faith with some people out in the world, they'll be like, well, if there is a God, why did he allow this to happen?
Sure.
So I'm sure that kind of stuff goes through.
Oh, yeah, yeah. A lot of times I tell people I was mad at a God I didn't even believe in. Like I blame God for all this. I'm in prison for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And, but it was during that time that I really started seeing that what I was doing was just hurting myself. I wasn't hurting these other people. I wasn't making an impact on any of these other people.
Sure.
It wasn't changing my situation, only making it worse. So that was a big realization that I probably hadn't had before. In my demented state, I was just lashing out all the time. And so that kind of behavior sort of mitigated somewhat. I still had some encounters with the officers, but I was able to sort of maintain. But then in 2009, I caught another charge. I was in prison, and I was waiting to go back to court for that, and they were trying to sentence me to a whole nother life sentence
for your violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got transferred to another prison. It's called Telford Unit up near Texarkana.
Okay.
And this is like what they call a super seg. It's a really very more isolated type of environment, and bigger cells though, but just isolated. I remember I was waiting to go back to court, and one night I was really suicidal. It was just kept going over in my mind, how am I going to kill myself? How am I going to kill myself? Just at the bottom of the barrel, basically. And that's when I had an encounter with the Lord in that cell. And I always describe it, the best way I can describe it is Jesus walked in the cell with me.
Really? Yeah,
the presence and power of God became so powerful that I just began to weep for like the first time in probably 20 years. Even when I was a kid, my dad was always, men don't cry,
Sure.
Slap us upside the head if he caught us bawling or whatever, And so God just moved in on me. And I cried out to him. I said, God, if you're real, you're going to have to show me. Because I don't think I can have faith in you. I don't think I can believe in you, Certainly not the way I've seen people do it.
Right.
And it was in that moment that it was like he reached in my heart and just pulled the bitterness and the anger and the resentment and everything that had been driving my behavior, just ripped it out by the roots. Like I could almost physically feel it just lifting off of me.
Wow.
And right in that moment, I believe I was saved and filled with the Spirit and set free. But I had to go on this journey.
Yeah.
Of really learning who God is.
So you're about, 36 or so at this point?
This was in 2009, so I was about, right in that age range, 35, 36.
And you've been in isolation for almost 10 years?
Yeah, almost 10 years, almost
Wow.
a decade.
Wow.
Yeah. And the next 3 years was just me and God. And by that time, I was like pretty high up in the gang in the, like leadership, and so a lot of my life was connected to that stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And God began to show me I had an old Bible that I had been using the pages for rolling papers for years, you know. I always say I smoked up the whole Old Testament. God, God knew I was going to need the New Testament, so it was all still there.
That's great.
But the first thing he taught me in that moment was, if it had just been me, he would have done it just for me.
Whoa.
Right. And for the first time in my life, I felt valuable. You know, because my dad always said, "You're stupid. You're never going to amount to nothing. You know, you just screw up everything you touch."
Right.
You know, and that was, I took that on as my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was happening.
Right.
And I saw it as a fact, but it was never who I was. And so in that moment, God created the capacity in me to feel valuable.
That's so great.
Yeah. And I think that's a big deal.
Oh, it's huge
for men and women.
Well,
because
the search for significance. You and I have talked about this, right? Yeah. That's to be seen, to be heard, and to be known.
For sure.
And everybody has a hunger. Everybody has a longing deep inside for that.
Yeah. And I think people, they can see God as loving them,
mm-hmm.
and He gave Himself for them, but I don't think they know that He cares. I think a lot of people don't think He cares.
Cares for you
personally, the details of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it looks like a lot of times things just happen to you randomly or whatever. And like you said, you want to say, well, why is God allowing this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if He's in control of everything,
right.
Why is He allowing it? But they don't understand that in His goodness, He gives men free will. And He lets men make their own decisions in a lot of ways, you know, if that's what they want to do, because of His honor for His creation. And that's what causes the things that we think, you know, He's not necessarily in control of that.
No.
You know, He's there if you want to open those avenues for grace for Him to come in. But if you want to do your own thing, He's going to let you do it. And you're going to reap the consequences.
Yeah, I've always thought of it this way. On base level, religion, on base level, oftentimes puts God in this position where He's kind of watching a big board game. You know, He's in control, and but we don't have any real capacity for relationship, right?
Yeah.
And intimacy and knowing that He cares and He'll interact and those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, look at Abraham. He changed God's mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? About if there's one righteous.
That's right.
You know, if you can find the righteous, don't destroy it, you know?
That's right.
And Moses did too.
Reasoning with God.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not we're not on His puppet strings.
That's right.
You know, we're expected to live our life, but we have to open up to Him
mm-hmm.
in order
back to vulnerability, right?
Yeah,
it goes back to vulnerability. Are we vulnerable enough to open ourselves up? So
that's the place I was in that moment for 3 years, just me and Jesus in that cell, and it was all about just experiencing Him and learning about Him and. But even at the end of it, you know, during that time also as well, I was taken back to court, and they ended up not giving me another life sentence. They gave me a 5-year sentence. I signed for a plea bargain for a 5-year sentence.
Okay, so now you had an even 500 years.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, even 500. And so 2012 rolled around, and that's when God really began to move. In this place with God, He sort of brought up to me how in prison, my reputation, they used to call me Big Rhino. That was my prison nickname, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knew you didn't mess with me. The laws knew about me. Just, you know, it was a level of respect that I came to kind of rely on. just because of my past history.
Right.
And God began to show me that I was going to have to give that up because I had taken that on as my identity, and that's not who I am. That's not who I ever was. It's not who He created me to be.
That's right.
And so it was a vulnerable place for me to be in, to say, you know what, I'm going to give that up and just be me and be vulnerable. And it wasn't until I told God, I said, if I'm going to live the rest of my life in prison, I'm going to surrender to you and I'm going to live it with you. As long as I have you, then I'm good. And that's when they came pretty soon after that, and they said, you have a parole interview.
And you didn't
I was
expect
like, I wasn't even eligible for another 80 years.
So did you think it was a mistake?
Yeah. Thought it was a mistake. I thought, they called out the wrong person.
Yeah.
And so they took me down there, and I went through the interview and whatnot, and just joked around and just went for the walk, really, to get out of my cell,
Mm-hmm.
And but sure enough, I got an answer back not too long after that you may parole on all 5 99-year sentences at one time. Had them listed out on the paper.
And that doesn't happen.
No.
No.
Never heard of it happen, or nobody else has ever heard of it happen.
Right. But in all the years since that you've gone and talked to different prisoners and gone at these places, because you've gone back, you've never heard of anything like that.
Not like that. I've heard of people miraculously making parole,
Yeah.
or having their sentences overturned.
Right.
But nothing like that kind of
No.
miracle. So, and plus, a lot of people don't understand, if you're not in prison, you don't really understand. I'm still a confirmed gang member in ADSEG with over 30 staff assaults, over 250 major disciplinary infractions, 0 good time. I was classified as a line 3, which you had really supposed to be line 1 to even be considered for parole. So I was a line 3. And there was all this stuff stacked up that said, you're not going nowhere. You're doing it day for day.
Right.
So for them to even consider me like that was crazy miracle.
Sure. Yeah.
And so anyway,
but you
I didn't get out.
$5.99.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't get out right then.
No.
Because I still had this other 5-year sentence. I immediately started that and immediately began to be denied parole on it. And so I asked the Lord, what's going on, God? I made parole on these 5 life sentences, but I can't make parole on a 5-year sentence. I thought you were going to let me out. In my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going home,
Yeah.
But looking back now, I know. I didn't know then, but I know now. I still didn't see the Father for who He truly is.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Him as kind of like my dad, basically. This big mean man that's ready to beat me over the head every time I do something wrong.
Yeah. This
punishing God that's beat His own son to death. You know what I mean?
Right. Like He could say to you, okay, I'm giving you this parole. You better not mess up.
Yeah.
I got my eye on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I needed to have that idea of who God is changed, because that's not who He is.
Mm-mm.
He wasn't beating the crap out of Christ for us. He was in Christ, reconciling the world to Himself.
That's right. It's so good. So good. Yep.
And so that's how good He is.
That's right.
And I didn't know that. And so He took me on this journey. They said, well, you'll never get out of SEG. You're going to do the rest of this time in solitary confinement. Well, 8 months later, I'm getting out of SEG.
Wow.
Going to what they call the GRAD program, which is Gang Renouncement and Dissociation program in Texas prison. It's basically so you can be an ex-gang member officially and be done with it. So I did that, and then they shipped me to the WIN unit. And
where is that?
That is in Huntsville, Texas.
Okay.
Anyway, when I got there, the church there was in revival. I mean, God was just moving in that unit. And one of the main reasons was because several of the men there had gotten together. God had been preparing I believe, a place for me to learn about who he truly is. And I had never heard of like Bethel or Jesus culture or any of the teaching like Bill Johnson or any of that. And through an inmate there on the unit had wrote a letter to Banning Liebscher in California. He had read the book Jesus Culture.
Okay.
And God highlighting that letter to Banning. And he knew a guy that was running a BSSM school there in Huntsville in his home. And they had been getting words that revival was coming from the prisons.
Well,
And they had been they hadn't even done any really prison ministry yet, but they knew they were going to. They had words. Even Pastor Richard had told Charlie that he was going to be going into prisons before he ever did.
Yeah.
And so he he got a letter from Banning saying, hey, there's an inmate that wrote me up there at the unit where you're at. And he's really wanting a mentor or a father in his life. And why don't you go see if you can go visit him? And so Charlie went up there and they started visiting. Him and Paul started visiting. Well, they started dreaming of having a school of ministry in the prison.
Wow.
School at BSSM school. And so God worked it all out. By the time I showed up, they had just graduated their first group of 12 leaders, and they were opening the class up to 60 men. And one of my bros, that was in the gang with me, was there, and he was getting in it. He was telling me about it, and so I signed up for it and got in there, and that's where God began to expose me to these new revelations about who He truly is, and how He's a good Father, and that I'm His beloved Son, and that He cares about me, and He wants to be involved in every detail of my life if I just open up and let Him be involved.
It's so critical for us to know our identity. We have to first know His identity.
Sure, yeah.
It comes from that, right?
Yeah, it comes from that, yeah, for sure. Right. Because it's Him in us, then us in Him.
Right.
Just like John said in chapter 17. And another big thing that happened was I was introduced to inner healing ministry and sozo ministry. I began to really look at a lot of the guilt and shame and stuff that I was still carrying around with me. That it was still influencing how I saw God.
Yeah. For those who don't know, what does sozo mean?
Sozo it just means saved, healthy, and whole.
Okay.
It really means whole.
Okay.
Being made whole.
It's a Greek word, right?
Yeah, it's a Greek
salvation.
word. Yeah, for salvation.
It means saved, healthy,
healed and delivered.
Healed and delivered or whole.
Saved, healed, and delivered. But it really means whole.
Yeah.
God wants you to have a whole heart. Right?
Complete, lacking nothing. Right?
Exactly. Okay. He doesn't want us to walk around with holes in our heart.
Okay.
Or brokenhearted.
Sure.
Right?
That's good.
That's Isaiah 61. He came to heal the brokenhearted.
That's right.
And so I still was brokenhearted. I still they say if a double-minded man the Bible says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean 50-50. Right?
Right.
If you're 90-10, you're still double-minded.
That's right. That's good.
And so I needed all that. I needed to be 100%. And that's what I think sozo counseling, I think that's what you can achieve in that. Because even though I believe that Christ did everything He possibly could, and the efficacy of the cross is all encompassing, I think our minds still trick us. We have to. It's like Dr. Kathy says, you applied the blood, but when did you apply it? And where did you apply it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It talks about our minds being renewed, right?
Yeah.
We have to be renewed daily.
Yeah.
Right. It's what you're focused on. So.
And my wife always says she had a blood transfusion with Jesus, and it's true because He changes your DNA.
That's right.
And I really believe He renews your mind in the same way. Your mind, there's a lot of integration theory and psychological, like neurology, that's been coming out recently with epigenetics and stuff like that, where it shows like certain environments can actually retrain your brain. You know, like being in the presence of God can retrain your brain. I mean, just the synapses are going to flow differently. And so that's what he was doing in my heart. And
okay, so you're in the school of ministry. You're going through that. When did you get out?
Yeah, so I've spent about another 3 years there, just really getting healed and whole and seeing God move and miracles happen and just craziness. Well, then May 5th of 2015, I was released from prison.
Coming on 9 years.
Yep. May it'd be 9 years. God really prepared me for that. I didn't believe it was real till I walked out the gate. I thought something was going to happen to pull me back.
That had been so surreal.
Yeah. And the first thing I realized was I was not prepared. I mean, I thought it was going to be one way, but it was another way, you know. And I tell guys that when I go back, it's not going to be nothing like what you think. You can sit in there in that prison cell and think about what your life's going to be like. But when the rubber hits the road, you know, it's like I heard Mike Tyson say the other day, no strategy ever survives the first punch.
That's good.
I thought, yeah.
That's good.
That applies to it.
Plus, in your case in particular, I mean, the changes in the world in that 20-some years.
Yeah, you know, I didn't know how to use a smartphone or email or internet. There was no internet when I went in there. No. So it was all new. Right. You know, I didn't know how to use a debit card. Gas pumps were all new. You know, when I got locked up, they still had that lever on the side with the roll numbers. Yeah. So I had to relearn everything. But God sent people to help me, and you know, I taught myself how to run heavy equipment on YouTube and got my first job and just started learning, started going, started doing. I always say that to me, freedom is patience with all the options. Because in prison, you don't have any options.
Right.
And you think you're a patient man, you spend all that time in that cell, you should be patient, right? You should know how to wait.
But you don't have any options.
But you don't have nothing to wait for.
You. Right.
Other than they're going to bring chow in a few hours or whatever. Yeah. You know, Rec's going to be at 10 o'clock or whatever.
That's right.
There's nothing really.
So you get out, you have all these options, all these choices. And that's when you start to learn what freedom.
Yeah. And it's scary.
Yeah, I bet.
There's a lot of fear in it. And I had to learn how to deal with that. I think I'm still learning. Mm-hmm. God put the right people, put fathers and mothers in my life to really help me, show me things I needed to know. And he's just faithful to do that, you know. Yeah. And so I really have a heart for that. You know, men need fathers, men need mothers, whether they're natural or not.
Right.
You know, and as a matter of fact, they need both. Spiritual mothers and fathers and natural.
That's right.
Because I believe that Jesus and the disciples, they modeled that.
Yeah.
You know,
isn't it interesting?
Even the whole Bible models that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
What I love about your story too that we didn't get to is, you know, when you and Dawn met, right? And then you got married.
We're getting to that part.
And we're getting to there, but to see where you are today, that you are a father, spiritually and in the so-called natural, to so many of these women that you guys minister to. But anyways, keep going.
So I guess almost about 10 months. It was about this time of year in 2016. I got invited to go to a prison evangelist conference in Waco, Texas, and by one of the top administrators in Texas prison, a guy named Clint Morris, a good friend of ours. And he had brought my soon-to-be wife, I didn't know it, Dawn in. She had done like 40 prisons in 13 days, and this conference was her last little speaking engagement.
Okay.
And so that's where we met. And God spoke to her in that meeting while I was giving my testimony that I was her husband. And she always tells the story about, she said, the devil is a liar. She didn't want a husband, you know, because if you know her story, she's been through hell with men, and she's been trafficked and raped and almost killed, stabbed 8 times by a serial killer, and just horrific, abused by both her husbands, and just bad stuff with men. So Jesus was her husband. You know?
Yeah. We're gonna bring Dawn on here one of these days too.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, she'd be awesome. And but she had a house full of girls. She had started a ministry called Radical Restoration back in 2005 when she got out of prison. She spent 13 years off and on going in and out of prison. And her last time, she was a homeless prostitute on the streets of Daytona Beach with a needle hanging out of her arm, you know, when she got locked up. And I always like to say she found Jesus in solitary confinement just like me.
Yeah.
But she's meaner than me. They had to put her in a straitjacket.
Yeah, I'm not gonna agree she's meaner, but she's amazing. Let's just leave it at that.
She used to be.
Yeah.
Sweet now.
Yeah.
Anyway, she'll laugh when she hears that.
Yeah.
But God put us together, man, and you know, she put these fleeces out before the Lord, you know. Mm-hmm. She said, you know, if he's my husband, he's gonna have to speak the word over me every day. He's gonna have to be the king. He's gonna have to pray over me in my ministry every day. He's gonna have to be the king and priest in my household, prophesying into my life, you know, speaking to my life. And if we ever go on a first date, he's gonna have to show up with yellow roses with red tips.
Okay. Okay.
And so, without me even knowing about any of that, I guess it was a month or so later, she, my friend that had went with me to this conference, his son's mother's bad in meth addiction. He was trying to get her into the program Don had. And so she wanted to meet him at this Olive Garden over in Dallas. She's living in Florida, but she was going to come to Dallas for this conference. And so we met her over there. He asked me to go with him. And during the process of that, I ended up getting her phone number because his phone died or something. Mm-hmm. I ended up having to call her to find out what Olive Garden she was at. And so that night when we left there, Jed, he's a pretty real prophetic guy, you know. And he was saying, "Man, I think there's something going on with you and Dawn." I was like, "What do you mean? She didn't even look at me." And if you ask Dawn, she'll tell you that night she was so scared she wouldn't even talk to me. Yeah. She didn't want to influence nothing that God was doing. Like really didn't want it to happen, you know. Yeah. And so God was taking her through a lot of healing and during that time, and just really, she was just travailing before the Lord and going through a lot of inner healing and stuff. And I was sending out scriptures, you know, to everybody I know for a long time there. And that morning after that, God was like, she asked Dawn if you can send her a scripture. So I asked her, yeah. So I started sending her a word every day. And then one day, put it on my heart to pray for her and her ministry and to let her know that I was doing it. So I did that. And she would just give me one word answer. She was like, thanks, or great, or sure, or whatever. Yeah. And that's great. Yeah, so then she texted me one day after I sent her a scripture, and she said, I'm going to this big conference. Why don't you pray for me? I'm kind of nervous about it. And God gave me this word about her not being afraid to be vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought it was about going and being vulnerable with her testimony in front of all those people. But when she heard it, she knew that I was prophesying to her about being vulnerable with me.
Oh, well, yeah.
Just by how it was worded. And so that was like by then she was pretty convinced. Mm-hmm. And so she was coming one day to a Voice of Healing conference at Christ for the Nations with Heidi Baker, who's a good friend of hers. And
that's up in Dallas.
Yeah, in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I was going to pick them up at the airport. And felt like the Lord was telling me to get her some flowers. I went in there and got red roses. I was headed to the register. And he told me, them ain't the right ones. So I went and took them back and found the yellow ones with red tips.
And you had no idea?
I had no idea. And he told me those are the right ones. I really, looking back on it, I believe God just knew that she needed that confirmation, you know. So I had them in the passenger seat when I pulled up to pick them up. It was her and 3 of the girls from the ministry. And she had been keeping them involved in what was going on, even though she hadn't told me anything. Mm-hmm. And when she opened that passenger door and them yellow roses with red tips was laying there, they all 4 started crying.
You're wondering what's going on?
Yeah. I'm putting the luggage in.
That's so funny.
I know it. So anyway, that's how God put us together.
Yeah.
And we went on our first date and Reunion Tower there in Dallas. And it was this whole prophetic. That's where she told me what God had been telling her. Well, she is beautiful and I was attracted to her, but I didn't know, I wasn't really in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
So I went home after that and I was like, God, what am I supposed to do here? I don't understand. And immediately I had this vision. It took me back to like all the stuff that I'd studied about medieval history, which is one of my favorite time periods. And he showed me about the kings and queens would marry their sons and daughters off to each other for the benefit of the kingdom,
Right.
And he spoke to me in that moment. He said, I'm arranging your marriage for the benefit of my kingdom.
Wow.
And from that time on, I was in love with her, God just birthed that love in my heart
so
for
cool.
her in that vision.
That's so cool.
And so,
and you look at where you are now, you guys have this amazing ministry.
Yeah.
You've got homes for girls in Indiana, Florida, Central Texas.
Yeah.
You guys speak to people all over the United States.
Yeah.
You go into the prisons and encourage them. I mean, you guys have an amazing ministry.
Yeah, God's really just birthed it just from our faith in Him. I mean, we don't take any government money whatsoever or anything like that. We just trust that what He wants you to do, He's going to provide for.
And He has.
And He has. Oh yeah, over and over and over,
right?
Supernaturally. Yeah. We just moved into a horse ranch, 8-acre horse ranch, and burn it that we had been believing for the whole time we've been married.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had you trying to help us look at properties and just believing for it and trying to make it happen, and it never would.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it just boom.
Well,
with no debt whatsoever.
It's unbelievable. And those of you, here's Ron. He was the most violent prisoner in the Texas
gang member,
right, in Texas prisons. And right now, you've got to have the biggest heart. You're the biggest teddy bear.
Yeah.
You're the 6'5", 300-pound teddy bear.
God did that too because, I never dreamed when I was in prison that I'd be in women's ministry.
Right. Right.
And so when I first, and that was one of the things that Dawn was worried about whenever God told her that I was going to be her husband. She was worried that how was I going to fit into the ministry with the women? Because she had already had, I guess, a guy she'd been married to before had already cheated on her with one of the girls in the ministry. And so there was that going on, and he showed me in so many ways how being a father, it's not really about necessarily what you say. It's about you on fire for God.
Yeah.
And modeling what does a man of God really look like?
It's so good.
Right? Because these girls, man, they tell me all the time, Papa, I never saw a man of God. Not that I'm anything special. I'm just saying,
right.
My love for God and my burning for Him is evident to them.
Yeah.
And that shows them who I am in my interactions with them. There's no feeling unsafe for them. God told me one time, we had this girl. I was actually in church at True Life, and we had this girl that was from a Mennonite community in Oklahoma, and she was just really abused by her father and brothers, and she had a really bad view of men. And I'd been praying for her, Well, she came up to me one day during worship in church, and she told me, she said, God said that if I could trust you, I could trust Him. I mean, it just made me just begin to weep,
Yeah.
And I asked God, what does that mean? Why did you have her tell me that? And He spoke to that heart in that moment. He said, because I trust you and my babies.
Wow. Come on.
And it made me see what an awesome responsibility. Like I could be pastor, I could be evangelist, I could be apostle, whatever you want to call it. But my main job is Papa.
That's right. We've talked about that. I've got 6 kids of my own, right? And they're all adults now. My baby's almost 18, and but through everything we've been through, as a family, the charge that I know that God has put on my heart is whatever I do, continue to be an example.
Yeah. Be
a godly example of the Father. Keep pursuing God.
He showed me this in the story of Mary when she was pregnant with Jesus, and how her mom and dad must have been good people. I mean, they raised Mary. I mean, that shows you something,
right?
And she was awesome, and so she didn't go to them. She went to Zachariah and Elizabeth, right? And I remember, just really asking the Lord, what's the deal with that? Why would she do that? And it was obviously the right thing to do, because as soon as she walked in, the baby leapt in Elizabeth's womb, and they went to prophesying over each other. Zachariah, how could he be a spiritual father to Mary when he couldn't speak? He was struck dumb by the angel, in the Holy of Holies. But he had such a powerful encounter with the Lord in the Holy of Holies, they thought he was dead in there. They thought they were going to pull him out by the rope. They've tied a rope to their ankle in case they died in there, so they could pull the body out. But he stayed in there so long that they thought he was dead. Right? The Bible says that. And so, to me, that says he had a powerful encounter with the Lord, even though, he didn't necessarily handle it exactly right. But he must have been burning for God to a powerful degree. And all Mary had to do to be fathered by him was sit at his feet and watch him burn.
That's so good. So good.
And it's true, because when they handed him that tablet, after John was born, the tradition is to name him after him. He should have been Zachariah, and he should have been in line to be high priest, just like his father. Right? But he didn't write Zechariah. No. He hurried up, wrote John.
That's right. That's right.
So he was on fire. He was just really burning for the Lord.
He couldn't wait. He couldn't wait
to name him John.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So good.
So that's what I really look at when I see my role as father in their lives, and my own stepchildren's lives and grandkids. And I didn't think I would ever have a family at all.
Well, look
God's
at this.
really just given me.
You've got a huge family now.
Huge family, yeah. It's so crazy.
Good. I love your story. Love the life, and I'm so grateful that he brought us together. That's one of the best things about the story is, selfishly, is because we're friends.
Sure.
I get to benefit from that. But
he loved you so much that he did all that for me.
Isn't that awesome?
To bring me to that moment when we met.
Yeah. That's so good.
I was telling the guys in the prison that the other night. I said, don't discount this moment of us coming in here. I mean, it's just us coming to a prison and speaking to you guys, but God did a whole lot of stuff just to make this moment happen.
Oh yeah.
Just like us on this podcast. We don't discount the power of this moment, because it's just really us in the studio doing what we're doing. But God did a whole lot of stuff in both of our lives to get us right here to be where we're sitting in these chairs.
That's right.
And it's significant.
It's significant. Whatever he does with it, he does with it. But it's significant. And, as we go forward, and I think we'll probably kind of wrap this one up.
You want to talk about the judge?
Oh, yeah. We can't wrap it up until we talk about the judge. This is a great part. So we're just going a little bit long, but that's okay. This is a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. So after Don and I got married, we came back to Texas, and we were in a little church in the hometown where I went to high school, Lone Oak, Texas. And Pastor Green introduced me to this man named Robert Newsom. And I said, immediately when he said that name, it just went all over me. I know that name from somewhere. And I couldn't think of where it was. I kept thinking about it. Finally, that night, I realized that's the name of the judge that sentenced me.
To the 5 99-year sentences.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I called the pastor up, and I was telling him, He said, "Oh no, he is a judge though. I'm gonna, you know." So he ended up calling him later that week. Well, he was coming back to preach the next Sunday, and he's preaching on intimacy with the Father. I always thought that was ironic.
Yeah.
But not only was he the judge that sentenced me, but he was the DA that charged me when I was juvenile. So he'd been in my life for a long time.
Wow.
And he went back and looked at the records, you know, and found out, sure enough, it was him. And so we went up at the end of the service, and me and Don, and he looked up at me. He's kind of a short guy, you know. And he said, "Are we all right?" You know, God had already prepared me to meet him, you know. And
Yeah.
I had forgiveness in my heart for him already. And I gave him a big hug, and he invited me and Don to his living room. They were having prayer meetings at his house in Sulphur Springs. And so we started going there, and God just really blew the doors off that place. And it started revival in the community. And in 8 months, it went from the 20 people in the judge's living room to 300 or 400 in the civic center.
That's amazing.
We started going in the jail, and God blew that place up. And the sheriff got saved, and judges all took notice of it. And, you know, we ended up in front of all the city and county officials, you know, giving our testimony. And then that's where Kenneth, the warden I was telling you about that was watching them videos of them, that's where he's the jail administrator.
Okay.
And so he ended up, now he buses all the inmates to the Free World Services, and they have church together. And we get girls from there court ordered. Instead of sending them to prison, they court order them to us. And it's just been an amazing, amazing ride, man. God's used that place in an amazing way to help set people free.
Yeah.
And to show his love.
You know, it's unbelievable. But when I think about you and Dawn and all the girls, you know, the word redemption just jumps out. You know,
Sure.
how God has redeemed you in your story. You know, and I know that part of what my heart for men in particular, but for everybody, is that when we find ourselves at a point in our lives, you know, when we find ourselves at a point in our lives thinking maybe we missed it, maybe it's too late for me, you know, especially when you're talking about guys who are moving on in the 50s and 60s, regret, disillusionment, feeling like, man, what do I have to live for?
Abraham was 80 when God called him out of his father's tent.
Right.
He was laying around eating peeled grapes.
That's right. And I guarantee you,
messing with servants.
There's nobody, because I was jacked up in my own way, but there's nobody who's listening to this podcast who could compare to the literal hellhole that you came out of.
Right. And the wasted years.
In the wasted years. And look what God's doing. He's redeeming everything, you know.
And it's not over yet.
Oh, no, it's really
just beginning.
Yeah, the next third's your best third, baby.
Yeah.
So it's so good. I tell you what, keep your eyes open for the upcoming episodes. But if you do me a favor, if you'd hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, that would really help us get this out to more and more and more people. And we're going to put some links down below, and those links will lead you to not only Next Third, Best Third, but hopefully Radical Restoration and ways that you can maybe get involved and help support their tremendous work that they're doing.
Amen.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.